Welcome to season 4. I got a question for you. What do Harry Belafonte, O.J. Simpson, Sidney Poitier, Frederick Douglass, and Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas have in common? Think about it, and I'll... Welcome again to season 4 of I'll Tell You What, the podcast that's all love Black history. I'm Ashley, your favorite raconteuse that shares these stories with you every Monday. So subscribe, follow, leave a review, share, and join us on Patreon to become a true aisle runner. So what is the common link between Harry Belafonte, O.J. Simpson, Sidney Poitier, Frederick Douglass, and Clarence Thomas? You know this. Probably because you clicked on something to actually get to this episode, but anywho, these are 5 men who were known for their love and adoration of white women, but actually were married to a Black woman at some point in their lives. These women were there when these men were broke, didn't have anything, and were aspiring for the greatness they ultimately achieved, while not always being credited for said role in the success, but obviously having a major part in it coming to fruition. So today, on this first episode of the new season of I'll Tell You What, I'm going to tell you about these women and those marriages. Let's start with one you probably remember, Harry Belafonte's marriage to Marguerite Bird. Everyone remembers that Eartha Kitt quote about Harry Belafonte when allegedly, after a moment in bed together, he said, quote, "I don't want you to take this seriously. No Black woman can do anything for me." But he was actually married to a Black woman, Marguerite, for nearly a decade. Let's go back. The love story between Marguerite Bird and Harry Belafonte began at Hampton Institute in 1944. Marguerite, a psychology student from a proud middle-class family, was focused on her future, while Harry, a Navy sailor with a fractured past, was still figuring out what's next. When Harry spotted Marguerite at a campus social, he boldly told her she might end up marrying him. Her witty reply, quote, "Has the world run out of other men?" Marguerite, you're a funny lady. But still, Harry was undeterred. For 4 years, Marguerite pursued her education and dated other career-driven men, but she and Harry remained friendly. So by 1948, a very pivotal moment arrived. After seeing Harry perform in Sojourner Truth, she embraced him with a hug. That same night, Harry proposed, albeit dramatically, threatening to toss her in the water if she said no, which, don't do that. But she obviously said yes, because a month later, they would get married on June 18th, 1948. They went to City Hall and had a ceremony where neither family approved. Marguerite's parents hated Harry for her. They disapproved of his lack of education and stability, while Harry's mom thought that they were just too young to get married. Life as newlyweds wasn't easy, obviously. Harry struggled to find steady work, and that placed a lot of financial and emotional stability on Marguerite. Despite that, they had their first daughter, Adrienne, in 1949, and their second child, Shari, in 1954. And once Harry's career gained momentum, it just pulled him further from home. Marguerite often found herself at odds with Harry's world of entertainment and activism. She once said, quote, "I just found the showbiz world to be shallow and false," shading her man's profession and the seriousness of it. So by the mid-1950s, their relationship had completely deteriorated. This was around the time that Harry was having an affair with a white woman, a dancer named Julie Robinson, whom he would later marry. Like, speaking of that affair though, Marguerite found out about it just days after giving birth to their second child. Can you imagine being postpartum and learning that your husband has been cheating on you for quite some time? So So, obviously, the next step in their marriage was to end it, and their divorce in 1957 marked the end of a tumultuous chapter together. But for Marguerite, however, it was the beginning of a new phase in her life. Marguerite, ever the academic, earned her master's degree and her PhD, becoming a very prominent child psychologist. She held leadership roles in organizations like the NAACP and Capital City Links, and her work in public service earned her widespread respect. After dating several well-established careermen, she married Dr. Edward C. Mazik, a distinguished internist and civil leader in 1967. Even Harry himself said that Dr. Mazik was, quote, just the man Marguerite should have married in the first place. He knew deep down he was never good enough for her. Marguerite balanced her professional achievements with a keen sense of community. She chaired fundraisers, led social organizations, and even dabbled in acting, proving she wasn't entirely opposed to the entertainment world. Though her marriage to Harry often overshadowed her individual legacy, Marguerite lived a life marked by resilience, intellect, and impact. Her story came to an end on February 15th, 1998, when she passed away at 74. Despite the shadow of her first husband's fame, Marguerite was that lady. Now let's move on to another Marguerite, Marguerite Simpson. Thank goodness O.J. Simpson's best friend A.C. Cowlings had a problem with his girlfriend Marguerite, because how else would she have become O.J.'s first wife? Now let's start from the very beginning. Before the world knew O.J. Simpson as a football legend or a figure of controversy, he was simply Orenthal, a kid from San Francisco with big dreams and a charming smile. And long before the spotlight, there was Marguerite Whitley, the woman who would become his first wife. Their love story began, like many others, full of optimism and ambition, but would eventually crumble due to the negativity of celebrity. Now, Marguerite and OJ met in high school through his best friend AC, who happened to be dating Marguerite at the time. According to the New York Times, quote, Mr. Cowlings trusted Mr. Simpson so much that when he had trouble with his high school girlfriend Marguerite, he asked Mr. Simpson to talk to her for him. They talked to the point where they started to date instead. Quote, their dating at first enraged Mr. Cowlings, who tried to turn over a car in which the couple were sitting, but Mr. Cowlings could not stay angry with Mr. Simpson for long, and within weeks, they were friends again. Marguerite, known for her quiet demeanor and grace, complimented OJ's charisma and larger-than-life personality. They tied the knot on June 24, 1967, when Marguerite was just 18 years old and OJ was 19. At the time, OJ was attending the University of Southern California, where he was on the cusp of becoming a Heisman-winning football sensation. Their early married life was filled with struggle and excitement. Naturally, they were young. While OJ pursued his careers on the field, he had to balance school and football with the pressures of providing for their growing family. In 1968, the couple welcomed their first child, Arnell, and their second child, Jason, in 1970. But by the early 1970s, OJ's star had risen. As a running back for the Buffalo Bills, he became a household name, breaking records and earning fame that extended beyond the football field. Marguerite, however, was often left in the shadows, managing their home in Los Angeles and raising their children. By 1977, they had their third child, a daughter named Erin LaShone. When OJ basked in the glow of fame, Marguerite navigated the complexities of being a wag. Fame brought financial stability, but it also brought distance. OJ's growing commitments to his career and endorsements left very little time for his family. Marguerite didn't want to live in Buffalo, where it was cold, so she stayed in Los Angeles. OJ requested that the Bills trade him to a team in Cali to keep peace in the family. Marguerite later admitted that OJ's fame placed an immense strain on their marriage. In the book Super Wives, Marguerite said that she's been, quote, pushed and stepped on by more than one beautiful woman. She also mentioned a time when a stewardess openly flirted with OJ as Marguerite was sitting right next to him. When the stewardess asked OJ who Marguerite was, he didn't say, "This is my wife." He said, quote, "She's my sister." As Marguerite put it, quote, "It's disgusting." Outside of being married to an alleged flirt and philanderer, tragedy struck the family in 1979. Their youngest child, Erin, drowned in the family pool shortly before her second birthday. By this time, the marriage between OJ and Marguerite was disintegrating rapidly. So the same year, Marguerite and OJ divorced after 12 years of marriage, splitting $3 million and whatever additional money he made from his football career. Though their marriage ended, Marguerite's connection to OJ remained, especially in moments of public crisis. About 15 years after their divorce in 1995, during OJ's infamous trial for the murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman, Marguerite attended court hearings to support their children, particularly Arnell, who stood by her father's side. Marguerite tried to avoid the media spotlight during the trial, but her quiet presence was noted. Her role was not to defend OJ, but to provide stability for her children as they endured the emotional turmoil of the proceedings. In the years following their split and the trial, Marguerite stepped out of the public eye. She remarried twice, continued to raise her children, and created a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos surrounding her ex's controversies. Despite everything, she clearly remained a pivotal figure in OJ's life story. What'd you know about Marguerite? Now that we've talked about two Marguerites, let's move on to a Juanita, the first wife of Sidney Poitier. You remember when Sidney Poitier had that nearly decade-long affair with Diane Carroll while he was married? Well, let's focus on his marriage to Juanita Hardy. Juanita was a, quote, beautiful young girl, as Sidney called her. She was a former model, dancer, and seamstress, winning titles like Miss Medina and Miss Negro Press Photographer in 1950. She and Sidney tied the knot on April 29, 1950, which started what seemed like a promising career. Together, they raised 4 daughters, Beverly, Pamela, Sherry, and Gina, and later adopted a daughter, Connie. As Sidney's career progressed, they moved into a sprawling 12-room house in an interracial community in Mount Vernon, New York. Sidney admired Juanita's intelligence, once saying she was, quote, a hell of a lot smarter than I was about many, many things. But admiration wasn't enough to save their marriage. By 1957, cracks were already forming. Sidney admitted that tensions between them were frequent, caused by his wandering eye, growing fame, and the pressure of carrying the weight of Black representation in Hollywood. Quote, I began to display obvious signs of neurosis, he reflected, which is a mix of stress, anxiety, and the emotional burden of trying to reconcile his personal desires with his public persona. His neurosis, coupled with having trouble staying monogamous and his entanglement with Diane Carroll, led to the end of their marriage. By 1965, Sidney and Juanita divorced after 15 years together. Despite their struggles, Sidney had nothing but respect for her as a mother and a partner. In a 1971 interview with Ebony magazine, he said, quote, I was married once to a wonderful woman who turned out to be a remarkable mother, and if I were the marrying kind, I'd still be married to her. Though he claimed in the same interview that he wasn't, quote, the marrying type, Sidney would go on to marry Joanna Shumkus 5 years later. But Juanita's legacy as his first wife, the woman who built a home, a family, and a foundation during his rise to stardom, remains an integral part of his story. I don't know much about Juanita's life post-Sidney, but believe they had an amicable relationship, even with the second wife, based on the Instagram accounts of their children. Let's continue on with Frederick Douglass's wife, Anna. Truly, who is Frederick Douglass without Anna Murray? Born in 1813 to formerly enslaved parents in Maryland, Anna was the first of her siblings born free. By 17, she left her rural home for Baltimore, finding domestic work and saving what little she earned. This resourcefulness would become helpful in her relationship to Frederick. When Anna met Frederick in 1837, he was still enslaved. They fell in love, and Anna wanted to get her man to freedom, and did. She sewed his disguise as a sailor, lent him money, and helped secure a borrowed freedman's certificate. When Frederick successfully fled to New York, Anna joined him. They married on September 15th, 1838 at abolitionist David Ruggles' home. Anna brought with her nearly everything they needed to start their life together: furniture, clothing, dinnerware, etc. Eventually, they made a home in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and then later in Rochester, New York. While Frederick was outside at work, Anna worked tirelessly, mending shoes to support the household since living ain't free. When he traveled abroad from 1845 to 1847, Anna managed their growing family and saved every penny he sent. This home would have crumbled without her. Their New York home later became a stop on the Underground Railroad, which meant they hosted countless guests. Anna bore the burden of balancing Frederick's public life with their private one, often enduring judgment from others, including Frederick's colleagues. They would make fun of her illiteracy and make it seem as if she was just some dusty maid that didn't fulfill Frederick intellectually. So when Frederick engaged in affairs, allegedly, with these fans of his work and invited them to stay at their home, Anna would continue to be the courteous woman she was. After years of managing the Douglass household and supporting Frederick's mission, Anna passed away in 1882 after a series of strokes. And like I said before, if it weren't for Anna, that man would not be known at all. He owed his freedom and success to her, a woman he barely even mentioned in his autobiographies. Like, ill. By taking care of the house and their children, he was free to just do whatever, travel the world for a good reason, but thank you. And let's wrap with one more wife, Kathy Thomas, the first wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. I know, you'll like it. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas was a Democrat, almost became a priest, looked up to Malcolm X, and was married to a Black woman. The story of Kathy Ambush and Clarence Thomas began in 1969 after he met her on the campus of Anna Maria College in Paxton, Massachusetts. Then, Kathy was a freshman at Anna Maria and Clarence was a sophomore transfer student at the College of the Holy Cross from Penn Point, Georgia, that was carrying the weight of his past, weight that was filled with poverty, segregation, and a very complicated relationship with his family. At Holy Cross, Clarence was one of a handful of Black students. He often felt the feeling you have when you're just one of a handful. Seeing and connecting with someone like you is just so meaningful. Clarence said they began dating, quote, since she shared my political views and, quote, went to demonstrations together and, quote, launched a free breakfast program together. Over the years, Clarence grew close to Kathy's family, which made it easy for their relationship to go to the next level. Clarence wrote that during his junior year of college, he proposed to Kathy. They planned their wedding to take place the day after he graduated from college to make the travel plans easy on their families, more specifically his family in Georgia. Despite doubting himself as a husband and getting drunk the night before, on June 5th, 1971, Kathy and Clarence got married. He wrote, quote, being with Kathy had already brought me more joy than I'd ever known in my adult life. How could I walk away from her? Their early married life was filled with the challenges of building a future together while not having a lot. Clarence entered Yale Law School and Kathy dropped out of college. So while her man was in school, she worked tirelessly to provide financial and emotional stability. In February 1973, Kathy and Clarence welcomed their only child, a son named Jamal. Parenthood brought joy but also amplified the cracks in their marriage. Clarence's burgeoning career in law and government required long hours and frequent absences, leaving Kathy to shoulder much of the responsibility at home. Still, she remained steadfast, dedicated to creating a nurturing environment for their son. As Clarence's professional life flourished, he began to evolve politically and personally. He shifted from being a Democrat to an independent and eventually a Republican. The anger that had once driven him to advocate for racial equality began to manifest in different ways, distancing himself from the ideals he and Kathy once shared together. Their differences, once complementary, became stark. Kathy's views clashed with Clarence's shifting worldview. By winter 1980 or early 1981, Clarence moved out, leaving his wife and son. He said, quote, "It was the worst thing I've done in my life." Their divorce was finalized in 1984, and Jamal, a preteen, moved in with his father. Kathy moved to New England, and I don't know much else about her life after her divorce. It's believed she remarried again, but details about her life post-Clarence are barely existent. And if she did marry again, if I read the right obituary, he passed away last year. So overall, I know this don't change how you feel about him and all that, but yeah, what do you think? During the 19th and 20th centuries, Black women like Marguerite Belafonte, Marguerite Simpson, Juanita Hardy Poitier, Anna Murray Douglass, and Cathy Ann Bush Thomas played pivotal roles in the lives of their famous husbands. These women provided emotional support, stability, and resilience as their partners navigated the challenges of ascending fame, ambition, and societal expectations. Marguerite Belafonte, Harry Belafonte's first wife, balanced raising their children while he pursued a career that took him from civil rights marches to Hollywood sets. Marguerite Simpson stood by OJ during his rise to football stardom, managing their home and children despite his infidelity and distance. And Juanita Hardy supported Sidney Poitier through the struggles of early acting roles while dealing with the emotional toll of his growing fame in their eventual divorce. Anna Murray Douglass ensured Frederick Douglass's success by aiding in his escape from slavery, running their household, and raising their children during his international abolitionist tours. Cathy Ann Bush Thomas, Clarence Thomas's first wife, supported him through law school and his ascent into government, despite the emotional distance and changing views that ultimately ended their marriage. The shift of Black male celebrities leaving their Black wives to marry white women often stem from societal and personal factors. Now, that's not to say I agree with any of this, but truthfully, it happened because some sought relationships that aligned with their increasing exposure to predominantly white social circles and elite industries. Others believed that interracial relationships would improve their acceptance in mainstream America. And for some, internalized biases shaped by systemic racism played a role, leading them to equate whiteness with success or validation. Real heavy on that one. These dynamics reflected not just individual choices, but the racial and cultural pressures of the time. What do you think? And Owl Runners, that concludes this episode of I'll Tell You What. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, share, leave a review wherever you get your podcast, even if you watch the episodes, and come back next week for another episode in Love Black History. See you in the pews.